You already know what it is, man. It's the Kid Billionaire B, and in this video, I want to essentially break down how to fund your event space with no money out of pocket. For those who don't know, my name is Brian Waldron, aka Billionaire B. I turned my event space company into $3.5 million in just a few short years. Now we have the #1 event space consulting program in the country, breaking down how to find, fund, and fill your own event space. So in this video, we're essentially talking about the second part of that, which is the fund. Now, that is probably the most troublesome part of this whole entire journey for a lot of clients because you need a lot of money for event spaces. Typically on average, you will need about $30,000 to $50,000 to get it up and running. So with that being said, we want to make sure that we understand how to get that capital in order to make sure that the business is up and running the right way out of our own, not out of our own pocket, right? So 3 things that I want to break down: lift, learn, leverage. Now, what is lift, learn, leverage? Everybody who's in the chat right now watching this on Instagram, comment lift, learn, leverage, or just comment 3 L's. But one of the #1 things you want to understand is that when you are looking to fund your event space business, it's not complicated at all. It's just a few short metrics and things to understand in order to get this off the ground, right? So we want to be lifting our personal credit. We want to learn how to properly structure our business, and then we want to turn around and leverage it to get capital for our event space business, right? So let's start from the beginning. When it comes down to lifting your personal credit, I want everybody to shoot for a 680, right? Ideally, you want a 680 on your personal credit profile. Now, the personal credit profile is a lot more important than the personal credit score. What do I mean by that? When it comes down to that, there's 5 phases in credit, and those are things that we want to understand. We want to understand age, utilization, payment history, credit mix, and new credit. Let's break that down, what that means. When it comes down to age, ideally, you want 4 years of age on your personal credit profile. Now, you might not have 4 years of personal credit profile, so you can go ahead and do things like get an authorized user, right? You can become an authorized user on somebody else's credit profile, You can become so say for example, your mom has really good credit. She's had credit for a few years now. Your dad, uncle, auntie, sister, whatever the case may be. You can essentially utilize their good payment history and use that to boost your credit, right? Okay, cool. Next thing you could do is something called a trade line, where you can add a trade line onto your credit profile. Now again, this isn't something that's going to radically change your credit profile, but it does help, does give a boost. But you do want to have the rest of these things in line before you start looking at paying for trade lines or even paying for authorized users, okay? Second thing, which is probably the most important, is utilization. So utilization ideally wants to be between 10% and 30%. Your utilization ideally has to be between 10 and 30%. Now, utilization, for those who don't know, if you have $100,000 in available credit and you're using 90,000 of it, that's 90% utilization. That's showing to the credit card companies that, hey, this person really needs that credit, and that does not make you qualified to get more credit. So ideally, you want to have between 10% and 30% utilization. Now, there's a couple different ways to go about that. If you do have very, very high utilization, there's different ways to go and fix that. For example, you could do something called a debt consolidation loan, right? You can go on a website like SoFi or Meet Tally, where essentially they will give you an installment credit, because installment is treated differently from revolving credit, like a credit card. They will give you an installment credit to go ahead and pay off that revolving credit. That's something that's super major and super important, right? Another thing that you can do is something called hiding credit, hiding utilization between credit cards. I'm not going to go into that right now because that gets a little bit more sophisticated, and I feel like a lot of people do it wrong. So I'm not going to talk about that right now. But for right now, you can consider a debt consolidation loan. But remember, utilization between 10 and 30%. Payment history. Payment history got to be 100%. Payment history has got to be 100%. Imagine somebody asks you for money and they turn around and you say, oh, well, he only pays people back 90% of the time. Would you lend money to somebody like that? Probably not. So it's really, really key to make sure that you have 100% payment history so you can go ahead and get lines of credit from these different banks and whatnot, right? Next, credit mix. Ideally with credit mix, you want auto loans, home loans, phone bill. A really easy way to get around this is do something called self-reported accounts. Now, for those who don't know, an app called Self, this more so goes to payment history, but with an app called Self, you can essentially prepay for on-time payment history. So it'll take $30, $40, $50 out of your account every single month, repay it back to you at the end of the term, and that shows you have 100% payment history. Another self-reported account is something with Stellarfi, that's Stellarfi. So when it comes down to Stellarfi will essentially report your bills. They'll report, Self actually has something like this as well, but they'll report your bills, they'll report your Hulu account, your Netflix, they'll report your water bill, your Disney Plus, whatever the case may be. Like I mentioned, Self has an option to do this as well. Another thing that you can do that's kind of like a trade line is Credit Strong. So Credit Strong, they'll do the same thing except for bigger amounts. They'll put like you can pay to get like a $3,000 reporting line of credit on your credit profile, which goes into the credit mix as well. So again, just to recap, you got Stellarfi, you got Self, and you have Credit Strong, okay? So now with that being said, those things are reporting to your credit. Now the last part of that is new credit, AKA inquiries. Ideally, you don't want no more than 4 inquiries on credit profile in the last 6 months. Okay? Very easy to get off inquiries. You could call the bureaus, you could let them know. Any inquiry that is not attached to an open account in your personal credit profile can be removed. Just putting that out there. Any inquiry that is not attached to an open account on your personal credit profile can be removed. Call the bureaus, get it off, get it removed, whatever the case may be. Now, I'm going to erase this part just so I have more space over here. Come down to business structure. Now, when it comes down to business structure, there's a couple things that you want to understand, right? Business structure is the business entity, which AKA is like your LLC. Now, I know a lot of people say, should I get an LLC? Should I get a C Corp? Should I get an S Corp? Whatever the case may be. Now, LLC is good for a business up to about $40,000, $50,000 in a year. Now, I know you might look at this and be like, oh my God, like I'm definitely gonna make more money than that, whatever the case may be. Most business owners don't. Only about 4% of business owners actually make $1 million in a year, and only about 0.025 make $10 million a year, which means that a lot of people who do create LLCs actually don't make any money that first year. It is what it is, unless they get a mentor, and they're smart about it, right? So, an LLC, good to start out with. LLC, but the real important part of this is how you structure it, right? So first thing we want to do, generic name, okay? Generic name. Typically, I like to use the formula last name plus enterprises, last name plus holdings, last name plus corp, last name plus solutions, those type of things, right? Next thing you want to do is a business address. Stop using your personal address to get your business off the ground, right? Business address. You want to use a proper business address. And more importantly, if you don't have an office, if you don't have a business address, what you want to do is you want to go ahead and use a virtual address. So, with a virtual address, this is essentially a company that is basically pimping out their address to other people. So you can use a website like Regis or Opus to go get a virtual address. And they actually have a suite of other things like that where they'll do a virtual receptionist, whatever the case may be, just to make sure that you're cool, copacetic, all that good stuff, right? Next thing that you want to understand is that instead of paying for a virtual address from one of these two companies, which is probably going to be about $99 a month, is that you can also get something called a registered agent. Now, by default, you do need a registered agent to get an LLC anyway. The registered agent is the intermediary between the government and between you to get all that file paperwork and stuff like that. But there are registered agents that also do allow you to use their business address. And that is typically only about 15 to 40 bucks for the year. Major difference, right? Next thing, business phone number, right? Stop using your personal phone number for this. Business phone number. You can use a website like Dialpad, right? You could use a website like dialpad.com or Grasshopper to go and get an actual business line, Okay? Business phone number, business address, generic name. Those are the top things that you really want to consider when it comes down to structuring your business. Now, the last part about this is leverage. So now that we have our personal credit profile well structured, lift, we have our business structure well structured, learn, now it's time to go get some money from the banks. Ideally, I love to start with personal credit cards. So I'll start with personal credit cards. Always start with your bank. So if you currently bank with Navy Federal, I would start with getting a personal credit card with Navy Federal. Then the next part about that is business credit cards with PG. That's with personal guarantee. And then the third part about that is biz credit cards, no PG. So as you can see, there's tiers to this. So if I'm leveraging my personal credit and my business structure, right? First thing I want to do is personal credit cards. Start with your bank. Then go to the big banks, such as Chase or American Express. Then you want to go to the business credit cards with the PG. You can get a business credit card leveraging a personal guarantee. The only difference with that is that they're saying, hey, look, listen, if you mess up, we're going to come after your personal credit line. But you'll still be able to get higher limits with a PG. Obviously, the goal is business credit cards, no PG. But typically, that's not going to happen unless you have 2 years tax returns, 3 to 6 months bank statements, or a lot of vendor accounts, which I've talked about in other videos as well. Okay? Start with the personal credit cards, upgrade to the business credit cards with a personal guarantee, and then you want to go ahead to the business credit cards, no personal guarantee. In Event Space Elites, we actually structure all this for you. So every client that comes into Event Space Elites, we actually do a full credit stack and assessment so that we can see the exact banks and the exact cards that we feel that you have the highest likelihood of getting approved for. You go and apply for them, which is how we're able to get so many of our clients anywhere between $30,000 and $120,000 in funding. I'm actually going to drop the link for Event Space Elites in the description of this YouTube video. Make sure y'all tap in. Again, my name is Brian Waldron. Make sure y'all subscribe. Make sure y'all apply. Let's get it. Let's go.